Welcome to a deep dive, everyone. And get this, we're going straight to the heart of Islamic scholarship, but in a place you might not expect. Ready to explore?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Today, it's all about Hadeeth studies.
Fascinating stuff.
But not just anywhere. We're talking about Gujarat, India.
Really interesting choice. I'm excited to dig into this.
We're going to unpack this book, Ulema of a Hadeeth of Gujarat. It's packed with stories of these incredible scholars.
I have to say, it's a journey that really reflects some bigger trends we see in Islamic history in general. And we're not just talking about names and dates here. We're talking about how knowledge traveled, the sheer dedication of these individuals, and how they shaped a whole region's understanding of faith.
Okay, I have to admit, when I think Gujarat, Hadeeth scholarship isn't exactly the first thing that pops into my head. Textiles? Maybe. Delicious food? Absolutely. But this book paints a totally different picture. Like starting with the idea of Gujarat as a barren land when it came to this kind of knowledge.
Yeah, you're picking up on a key point. Knowing what Gujarat became, it's almost hard to imagine. But centuries ago, that was the situation. The book talks about a time before formal Hadeeth study really took root, when the focus was on simpler religious texts.
So what changed everything? What transformed Gujarat into, as the book calls it, a garden of knowledge?
It's a story of migration, influence. And it starts with a few major figures in the 9th, 10th centuries. Think Sheikh Abdulmuti, Sheikh Ahmed ibn Badruddin Misri, Sheikh Muhammad ibn Muhammad. These scholars weren't originally from Gujarat. They were drawn there. They brought with them this wealth of knowledge from more established centers of Islamic learning.
Okay, so it's like a brain game, a migration of experts that just completely reshapes the landscape.
Exactly. And not just any experts. These scholars. They were steeped in the details of Hadeeth, the Prophet Muhammad's sayings and practices, masters of analyzing chains of transmission.
And that is?
Basically verifying the authenticity of a Hadeeth by tracing it all the way back to the source.
Now, for those of us who maybe aren't as familiar with Hadeeth study, break this chain of transmission idea down a bit more. It sounds like meticulous detective work.
Oh, it absolutely is. Picture a chain, right?
Uh-huh.
Each link is a person who passed on that Hadeeth. Scholars like the ones who came to Gujarat. They scrutinized every single link. Who were these transmitters? How trustworthy were they? It was all about making sure they were dealing with reliable knowledge.
So these scholars arrive in Gujarat, bring this deep analytical approach to Hadeeth. What's the impact? Are everyday people suddenly debating authenticity?
It's a little more nuanced than that. It's about a culture of scholarship developing gradually. These scholars attracted students. They set up institutions. Think of it like planting seeds that need generations to bloom. The book really emphasizes that this wasn't just about memorizing things. This was about cultivating a critical way of understanding the Prophet's teachings.
So they're laying the groundwork for a whole tradition of Hadeeth study in Gujarat, a legacy that's still around today. Now, this book goes deep into the lives of over 100 scholars. Any that stood out to you?
Tons. It's amazing, to see how each scholar brought their own, flavor to the table, their own unique way of looking at this huge field. For example, Allama Anwar Shah Kashmiri.
Okay, that's a name I need to write down. What made him so special?
He was a writing machine, and his commentary on Hadeeth, Fathu Mohim, people still study it today, it's that insightful. I mean, imagine diving into these complex points of law, theology, even ethics. He had this way of bringing it all together that really resonated, especially with students.
Wow. Centuries later. And his work is still shaping how people understand these texts. That's pretty powerful.
It really shows you the lasting legacy of these scholars. And it wasn't just about, theoretical knowledge for someone like Allama Kashmiri either. This guy was seriously involved in reviving traditional Islamic learning in Gujarat.
Right. The book talked about that period of decline, kind of a dip in Gujarat scholarship. What happened there?
It's a familiar story. Sadly. Conflict, instability, the stuff that gets in the way of learning. But the impressive part is the resilience you see in people like Kashmiri.
So he was like a bridge.
Yeah.
Between Gujarat's golden age of Hadeeth study and then the revival later on.
Exactly. He embodied that. And you can see that same thread through a lot of these scholars' stories. Hadrat Maulana Ahmed Noor Sahib Peshawari, for instance, he was known for his crazy detailed research,
but also don't leave me hanging.
He could connect Hadeeth to what was going on right then. It wasn't just like ancient wisdom, totally irrelevant. Peshawari saw how it applied to the problems of his time. That always struck me.
I was just thinking that it's so easy to get lost in the historical details and forget. These teachings are supposed to guide us now in our lives.
And that takes us to another fascinating guy, Hadrat Maulana Shaukat Ali Sahib Azmi. So if Peshwari was all about making Hadeeth relevant, Azmi was about how do we actually live this stuff?
Now you're talking. It's one thing to get the theory, but actually living these teachings, that's the real challenge.
Azmi was all about that. Knowledge into action. He saw studying Hadeeth not as some intellectual thing, but like a path, right? To transforming yourself, to living a better, more ethical life.
It's that link, between knowledge and action. That's what makes this whole deep dive really click for me. We can read all day long, study all night, but if it doesn't change how we treat people, how we move through the world, well, what's the point?
Yeah, it's a subtle theme, but it runs through this whole book, Ulema of Hadeeth of Gujarat. It's like these scholars are saying, hey, this isn't just for your brain. This is for your life. Share it. Let it guide you to something better.
Yeah, and what gets me is this isn't just about Gujarat, right? We've been laser focused on one region, but the book, it kind of hints at something way bigger. This web of scholarship. It's not just India. It's the whole world.
It's like we've stumbled onto some secret network. I mean, think about it. Those early scholars who went to Gujarat, they didn't just materialize out of nowhere. They had their own teachers, traditions, knowledge from other places, and they probably kept talking to scholars back in those places.
So Gujarat becomes this hub, this lively center, part of a much bigger conversation that's been going on for centuries. Wow. Now I'm picturing all these connections we could trace, all these other stories, just waiting to be uncovered.
And that's the beauty of this deep dive. It's not just about what we've learned, it's about the doors it opens. What other amazing pockets of scholarship are out there? What other traditions? Just waiting for us to discover them.
Feels like we're just getting started. But before we get too carried away planning our next adventure, I gotta ask, after all this, reading about these scholars' lives, what's your biggest takeaway? What really stuck with you?
For me, it's just a good reminder. Knowledge, especially religious knowledge, it's not about getting to some finish line. It's the journey. It's about always searching for deeper meaning, connecting to the wisdom of the people who came before, and then figuring out how do we actually live those teachings today in our own lives.
And that journey, as we've seen, it can take you to unexpected places, lead to amazing discoveries in places you'd never expect. Who knows? Maybe this deep dive will inspire you to start your own exploration of Islamic scholarship.